this week's podcast, I'm going to be asking, what is my why? How does my business relate to my why? And how do I keep in touch with my why after 15 years of running my greeting card company? Hello and welcome to the very first Faye Studio podcast. I am Faye Martin, founder of Faye Studio. I am going to delve into how I started my greeting card business in the depths of recession in 2009 to today, where I am selling thousands of cards all over the world. Follow my journey one step at a time through the blood, sweat and tears of being an entrepreneur whilst dealing with the challenges of living with 2 chronic autoimmune diseases. Join in the ups and downs of being a solopreneur and get lots of tips and tricks on how to evolve and pivot your business in an ever-changing and challenging retail landscape. You might be here to get some info on my brand, whether you're a retailer, a designer, a startup, or you have a chronic illness and need to find something relatable. I hope you'll find it all here and continue to listen to the podcast. In the show notes, I'll leave you some handy links to explore after this show. I turned 40 last year and it was a milestone for so many reasons, as I got to travel to Japan, which had been on my bucket list for 20 years. So much had got in the way of my dream in my 20s and 30s, so it had always been on the back burner because I was never well enough to travel. I couldn't even walk around the block some days, so a long haul flight was never going to happen, so it seemed. But I went to Japan with my best friend in April of this year, and after the most amazing 11-day trip and reaching that target, I was so proud of myself and just so thankful that I got to do it. When I got to see the views of Mount Fuji and my friend turned to me and said, "You did it," and embraced me, I know what he really meant. So that's where I'm going to start, right at the beginning. To know where you are now and how far you've come, you have to look back on what it took to get there. And so just after the holiday, I was feeling kind of empty, like, what is my why now? I couldn't put my finger on it, but I'd just lost my mojo. They say when a birthday celebration ends with a 0, it usually causes some sort of crisis. So I was doing the everyday tasks and fulfilling my orders, illustrating, but I just felt like a robot, and every day was Groundhog Day and everything was beginning to feel like a thankless task, and I was just a slave to paying the mortgage and the food bills and the insurance and keeping a roof over my head. I was honestly feeling really low. I was becoming more and more isolated from my industry friends and customers because for so long I was too unwell to be there in person on my trade show stand. And my mum or my agent was stepping in to meet and greet buyers and visitors on my behalf all the time. I realised that I was totally out of touch with everyone. I would get to the exhibition hall and then have to turn right round and go home again because I was too unwell to work. And this just wasn't working, as I was missing opportunities by not being there to see buyers and strike up conversations about my products. It was really eating into my confidence and my happiness to feel so disconnected and faceless. Then one day in June this year, I'm at home in the studio, when out of the blue a little card landed on my doormat. The envelope itself was just big enough for my address and a stamp. It was so cute and it was addressed to Faye Studio. I thought, what could be so small? It couldn't be a cheque from a customer that sometimes comes. And who writes to me anyway? It's not my birthday. So I open the card and inside reads, "Dear Faye." So already I'm thinking, this is someone who wants to show that it's personal. Thank you for the wonderful cards that my lovely husband Nick purchased from you. They're all outstanding, beautiful cards that I'll be very proud to send. I very much appreciate good quality cards and designs. I know I will most certainly have some comments from the cards to post. I still like to bless my friends with lovely cards and enjoy writing to a few people. P.S. Thank you for a handwritten note on the invoice. I know where to buy more cards in the future. Best wishes from Jane. Well, it hit me that I felt that warm fuzzy feeling when out of nowhere someone thought of you. I'm in the very industry that prides itself on connecting people. I know all too well that the trade-off of COVID was that everyone was so isolated. Do you remember those chain letters back in the 90s when you had to make 10 copies of the letter and send them to 10 friends, otherwise something bad would happen? I used to do those all the time, and during COVID, the government constantly writing to me to tell me it's not safe for me to go out because of my immunosuppression. It was like receiving those dreadful chain letters, the letters of doom. So this card that landed on my doormat was the catalyst to this very podcast, and why I felt I had a story to tell now, because don't we all need a reminder from time to time of our why? So I need to take you right back to the start of my journey with my health issues to help you understand how I achieved everything I did in spite of illness and in spite of all the adversity to come in my life. In order to understand my business and my brand, you're going to need to hear this, so keep listening. In 2002, I studied art and design in Falmouth at the College of Arts. Then I specialised in a degree, BA Honours Illustration at the Arts Institute in Bournemouth. And during the Christmas break of 2004, I was visiting my family back in Gloucestershire. And it was at this time I discovered I was bleeding from my bowel. I don't remember too much about that time because the brain has a really good way of coping with sudden adversity when you're young. And I remember I was referred to a specialist in gastroenterology in Bournemouth, had the various tests, colonoscopies, etc., and was told that I had ulcerative colitis. Well, they may as well have been talking in Latin because I'd never heard of it. And at that age, you think, well, I'll just take some pills and it goes away, right? Wrong. They said eventually at this time, as we're talking 20 years ago, 70% of people go on to have surgery to remove the bowel, to have a stoma fitted. And the doctor showed me an illustration of what that looked like. And keeping in mind, I'm an illustrator at this point, I'm looking at this image thinking, why is he showing this to me? That'll never be me. At the same time, I was also diagnosed with celiac disease, and this all made sense because I was getting a lot of gastrointestinal pain all the time, and I was catching a cold every 3 months, like it was always run down. Mum told me I always looked peaky, a bit pale, that's her words. As quite often celiac disease causes anemia because you're not absorbing vitamins and minerals because of the damage caused in your gut. So 2 autoimmune diseases to worry about now. A new strict food diet plan to adhere to, where at the time I used to get flour, pasta and biscuits on prescription, the sort of bread you could knock a nail in with. I had to have an endoscopy down my throat for these tests too, so I was having a bit of a rough time of it whilst trying to complete my degree. From 2005 up until 2015, I was back into what is known as remission. As in inflammatory bowel disease, you have times of flare and times of remission. So I had a good 10 years with no trouble whatsoever. I led a relatively normal life, except obviously not being able to order that pizza with friends. After uni, I didn't find work in my industry instantly. I got temp jobs in admin just to pay my bills, cleaning jobs, data entry jobs, anything and everything to help clear debt and keep on renting by the seaside. But it all got too much for me. I had black mould in my flat, and I had a landlord who left me with a gaping hole in my hallway for months with water pouring in, and I had to leave a washing up bottle catching the water, and I emptied that twice a day, and the mould ended up giving me sickening migraines and chronic sinus infections, so I had to get out. Plus at this time, on my minimum wage and trying to clear student loan, I was priced out of renting and had to move back to Gloucestershire to live with my mum and dad. And there I got a job with AstraZeneca, where I stayed for a year, where I met my husband to be, and then I moved on to what had become my dream job role of being a visual merchandiser. And I had leaned towards this during uni as I was obsessed with window dressing at this point. I even got some work experience at Lush learning their hand-painted fonts and designing for their windows. So I got a role at the largest of the Debenhams stores, and we had the most windows out of any of their locations, and it was a never-ending fun and fabulous job, and the people were great that I worked with, but my goodness, it was such hard work. And it wasn't that long before I started to notice the effects it was having on me. I was up at 5 a.m. and in bed by 8 p.m. every weekday, just trying to make it work. And one day I was up a tall ladder painting a column in the store, and I had a sudden wobble and head rush at the top of the ladder, which was weird. And I came down, I'd finished the painting, and I thought no more of it. Weeks passed and I was arriving at work one day. I'd entered the pin to get into the back stairwell of the store, signed into the staff logbook and started my climb of the 3 flights of stairs. And to my horror, when I got to the 3rd flight, I couldn't breathe. And when I say breathe, I was using my lungs, but it was like suddenly I was transported to the top of Everest because literally no oxygen was supplying my lungs. And it was frightening. I had to try to regain some composure and strength sitting on the stairs until things returned to some sort of normal. But as I walked into the store, I got as far as the homeware section, and the voice in my head said, there's something really wrong here and you need to sign out and you need to call your mum and you need to go home. And I was right, I had some blood tests and I was told that my iron levels were so low that I would need to go to hospital for an iron infusion. This was scheduled within days, so off to Gloucester Hospital I went. Just this weak little twig. The nurse attempted to get a cannula in at my elbow, but she was struggling to get a vein because she was struggling, I got all weird and lights were flashing, my vision tunnelled and I passed out. I woke up on a bed surrounded by nurses and I was on the monitor, all the wires. I passed out again, and this time in my sort of out of it dream state, a steam train came right towards me, hit me and snapped me out of it. I slowly came around to find the cannula was in and I gradually woke, and my mum had watched the whole thing unfold. She said I'd been having seizures and she thought she was going to lose me. Anyway, 6 hours later and the iron infusion was complete and I left the hospital feeling so much better, but I knew I was never going back to work in visual merchandising. I just knew. Then of course the recession hit. And although I was trying to find some sort of work with no driving licence, in rural countryside it's pretty hard to find anything I wanted to do. So I had to sign on just to get a bit of pocket money and a reason to leave the house to look for work, but there was nothing. So this was my pivotal moment, and I love the term pivot. I'll come on to that, but it has become my favourite word in business. My mum encouraged me to paint again, and I put some of my work up in a local art exhibition. I met a man there, a local artist, who asked if he could license my art to use and sell as greeting cards. He already sold cards and thought my designs would do well. So that was it. This was my first licensing deal, and writing the terms of the agreement was a bit tricky to begin with. But the designs did well and he licensed more. But then as things go, things started to get a bit weird, if you know what I mean. And he was asking me out on dates, and bear in mind he's old enough to be my dad at this point, so the business deal quickly bombed. But by this point anyway, I was already thinking, if he can sell my designs, why can't I? Now, I remember being told at uni to not go into the greetings industry, it's too hard, you can't make good money at it. And of course, if anything is difficult in life, I'm sure to give it a go and ignore good advice. So off I went, and I loved it so much. I enrolled onto New Deal, which was a government-backed scheme to get business startups into their business. You got £40 a week, and I attended meetings with my mentor, who wasn't all that punctual, and I used to get my goat because I was so full of ambition at this point. Any time wasted really frustrated me. I really needed more help, perhaps some further funding to get the products off the ground, and so I visited the Prince's Trust website. And I don't know who mentioned them, but I registered my interest to join their business enterprise course anyway, and this was the best decision I ever made. As within a few months I was on their course, building my business plan, meeting like-minded young people, and I was matched with a mentor who I'm still in contact with to this day. I also applied for their startup grant, and so this helped me to fund my website and to buy my stock. I started out creating cute Valentine's Day cards and also fashion illustration cards. And with a little sales trolley that my mentor gifted me, I went out on my sales adventure with no car, remember, as I still don't have a licence. I took the bus, the train, and by foot I trudged the streets of Bristol, Bath, Cheltenham, some of the Cotswolds and surrounding areas, and cold called every shop I could find, whether it was a card shop, a fashion store, a bookshop, a florist, a pet shop, you name it. I put on my big girl pants and I drove those sales all the way to the bank. And it wasn't that long at all before I had enough money to exhibit at my first trade exhibition, PG Live in London in 2010. And I'll come back to that because I could go on further here and just go off on a tangent, but I want to come back to how I built the business in the next episodes. So let's look now at, it's 2013. I left my parents' house to move in with my boyfriend at the time, and he was doing teacher training in the Midlands, hence the move to Lichfield. We got engaged the next year and decided to buy a house. Being self-employed, I was judged quite harshly by the banks, by the lenders, as I wasn't a solid contender for a mortgage. So back I went into fashion retail, working the same silly hours again, running 2 jobs, carrying really heavy boxes half a mile to work just to send out my distribution orders and keep my business going, whilst earning a measly £6.50 an hour in retail to make me mortgage worthy. And within 6 months, I'm a stone lighter and the symptoms of colitis are coming back. And it was such a stressful time, working 2 jobs, moving house and fixing up the home, because it was a bit of a do-upper, and I was planning a wedding, and then my beloved nan was sick and passed away. And the retail job under today's standards was horrendous and toxic. I remember scenes of being so dehydrated and going for long periods without even a chance to get water. That, you know, some days I'd be so thirsty that by the time I got a chance to go to the staff room, I would almost pour the water down my face and like drown myself because I was just beyond the point of desperation. And it just got like that at this place. And at this point I'm 5'11", I'm 5'11", and I got to just over 9 stone at this point. And my specialist had always told me to maintain a healthy weight of between 10 and 10.5 stone in order to keep well and always remain hydrated because of my illness. And this was just the straw that broke the camel's back. I was getting into designer size 6 dresses and looking in the mirror at a gaunt, unhealthy little twig again. Needless to say, I had to walk out of this job in the middle of the day for my own survival, really. And I knew I was never going back. So just recently, when this bright yellow card with a blue butterfly and a golden foiled text reading "thank you" arrived, I felt instantly connected, seen, and this thank you reminded me that what I do is really important. During COVID, I felt like what I did was as important as some of the key work going on, because families were so isolated from their loved ones and there was so much confusion and anger and heartbreak. The greetings industry played a huge role in keeping people connected. And since the high street shops were closed for long periods of time, us online sellers had to step in and step up. And in January of 2022, my sales turnover, just my first month in January on just one of my D2C platforms, was £40,000, which was an increase on a like-for-like year of more than 1,500%. I was working 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. every day and nearly having a breakdown, but this was my why. I had to not complain and just knuckle down because customers needed me to help. My parents moved in for a week under the guise of being staff, just to help me label orders and help with postal shuttles to the various Royal Mail boxes around town, and they were always full to the brim, and the posties used to get really fed up with me. It was an exhausting time, but it was a lucky problem, and it really distracted me from the truth that actually I was feeling really lonely because I was shielding and feeling quite scared by it all. Even during Clap for Carers, I would only clap from an upstairs window because I was too scared to get too close to anyone. And it now seems rather preposterous to think of, because when I actually got COVID in the end, yes, I was poorly, but it had nothing on the years that I'd suffered from colitis and the misery of that battle. But mentally, it was more damaging for me and really affected my anxiety, which I'd been suffering for years because of colitis. And colitis has a way of isolating you too. I had to constantly cancel plans with friends and family, and I spent most of a decade missing out because of flare-ups. And like 1 year I counted I had 28 doctor's appointments, not even counting the hospital visits. In 2017 I had the worst flare-up of all time and had to be rushed to A&E because I was losing enormous amounts of blood. I was kept in for 4 nights and I had to have intravenous steroids. And I think it was the equivalent of a month's worth of my usual daily intake of steroids. And my body had become steroid dependent at this point, and no medications were working up, helping me. So I was put onto a biologic drug then, administered by injection, which I did bi-weekly at home, and a nurse visited me to show me how to inject. At that point I was married, but I'm not now, because disease, chronic illness, it takes its toll, and it does have an impact greater than you'd expect. And as it turns out, in fact, if it had not been for my sudden sales surge in 2022, I would not have even been able to keep my home to pay off the sum of £25,000 that was required by the mortgage lender to give me a mortgage deal yet again. So COVID afforded me the security of my home, and I was able to build my studio as well and extend my workspace, which I'm so pleased with. So I come back to my why. I realised recently that I'd been for too long attaching my why to paying the bills, attaching my why to the overheads. You might do the same with your staff and your business rates and buying wholesale products and paying insurance and utilities and so on. And before you know it, you're not connecting with your community anymore. You're not reaching out to locals and local groups. And you've got your beautiful store, but customers aren't visiting because you've lost face and you've lost your why. And social media is working for us and against us, but remind yourself of your whys. And perhaps when you're not being a mum or dad, when you're not being a carer or the breadwinner, when you're just on autopilot and it's Groundhog Day, you're not growing and you're not connecting. And when you disassociate from your why, from your responsibilities, that's when you can find true freedom and the real meaning in what you do. And when you reignite that love of what you do, you'll find the energy to pivot and regain focus on what you do and what you love to do. And whether that's your creative job or whether you're a key worker or you work for a charity, whatever it is you do, if you're starting your business, if you're a cleaner, if you're a barista, or if you're suffering from an illness, I really believe that if you've lost your why, it's still there. We all have a part to play. You just have to rediscover it. And something I heard in just recent times was that sometimes if you've only got 30% to give in your day and you give 30%, you've given 100%. And I can't tell you, that would have helped me so much when I was going through all of my illness. But today I've been in remission now for 12 months. As I said, I got the holiday of my dreams and I would love to go back again because Japan is just a place that I love. And that's really the roundup of my story in terms of running my business with illness. So I hope you got something from that. I hope you learnt a little bit about, my life and what it is like to run a business when you're so poorly. But everything I've achieved, I've done in spite of it, and I'm really proud of where I am today. So I'm going to wrap up there for the first episode. I'm really looking forward to sharing the next episode with you, because I am going to delve back into how I grew the business, which is the most exciting thing for me. And please, if you like this episode, please like it, please subscribe, and I can't wait to share more with you next time. Thank you for listening. See you in episode 2.